Welcome to the first of what may be many fireside chats at Digital Photo Mentor. Today I have three guests with me and we're going to talk about travel photography. Since we can't travel for real right now and we're all stuck at home, we're going to give you a virtual journey around the world and get to see some of our images. So with me today I have Daniel Korzeniewski, who is one of
Hel-
my tour leaders.
Hello, how are you? Welcome, everybody.
And Cav, another tour leader for DPM. He's in England. Oh, he's muted. He's muted because his kids are screaming in the background.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
And lastly, but not least, we have Ugo Cei in Italy.
Hi, Darlene. Hi, Cav. Hi, Daniel. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I've traveled with all of these guys. I was just recently in Italy with Ugo at Venice Carnival, and I'm going to show you some of those images before all this happened, and then the word was normal. So I've got some images to share with you guys. Everybody's picked several images, so let's just go. Let's start with Ugo. Well, there's the first one. So
Okay.
do you want to tell us about this one, where it is, anything else you want to say?
This is in Scotland. This is a place, this is a ruined castle. It's called Castle, I hope we pronounce it right. It's Kilchurn or Kilchurn, one of the two, on Loch O. And it's a beautiful setting. And it's very easy to reach. Well, kind of easy to reach because you have to park your car along the road. And then you have to walk across a meadow. Sometimes the meadow can be a bit boggy, so if you want to go there, bring some wellies. Otherwise, you will wet your feet. It's always wet there.
So
then
for those of us in North America, he means like rubber boots.
Rubber boots, yeah. Wellies would be the British.
Yeah.
So you get to the shore of the lake, and you have this castle in front of you across the lake with the mountains in the back. And it's a great setting for, you're basically looking north here, so you get the sun setting from your right if it's in the morning, or rising from your right if it's in the morning, or setting from the left if it's in the evening. And sometimes, especially in the morning, this was taken in May, so in spring or autumn, you get nice fog lingering on the lake surface. And then sometimes you're lucky, the sun light pierces through the fog and illuminates the castle and the mountains in the back. So I was there twice, a couple of times in 2 consecutive years. And the first time I went there, we were there for a couple hours and the fog never lifted. We got some nice moody shots with the castle barely visible in the background. It was great because there was no wind, so very good reflections, but really not a great light. So we went back there in May of the year after. We went there, still thick fog. We waited for maybe 2 hours. Finally, the sun came out and gave us really great light. But there was fog still lingering on the surface of the water, no wind, crystal clear reflection, and some clouds atop the mountains in the back. So that's a wonderful location.
You raised a couple of really good points that I want to mention, because you mentioned how you went back more than one time and you waited for a couple of hours, right? And a lot of people who travel, may or may not have opportunity to do that, but they'll look at a great photo, maybe like this one, and go, oh, you got lucky. Well, I planned to go there at this time, and then I went there twice, and then I stayed there for many hours. So do you want to say anything about that in terms of there's more than just luck involved?
There's a lot of patience involved. So some luck, because, you might go there again and it might be raining. Who knows? Yeah. Being Scotland, it can always happen. And we planned it really. The second time I went there, I wanted to really go there again. So we rented an apartment on the other side of the lake. It was literally 10 minutes, so we didn't have to get up too early in the morning to go there. So that was really planned very much in advance to hope to get. But sometimes you don't get lucky even the second time. But we were lucky this time. I was still happy with the photos I got the first time. They were moody, foggy, but still good photos, I believe.
I like it. I think that often in bad weather you can get some better photos even or different than what everybody else gets, right? So you get something
Mhm.
different. All right, let's take a look at one of Dan's. We're just randomly coming up with them here, so I don't know what's going to come up. Now we are in Morocco.
We are in Morocco. Yes. I wanted to say. I mean, I think I show you a couple of different places, pictures from the different places, and these are coming obviously for most of them. I think, but Patagonia. Yes, I mean, you will see some pictures of Patagonia afterwards, but the ones that all the other ones were taken during photo tours with you, with Darlene, leading with her or on my own, but for her. And basically, one of the things that I have, a lot of time happens is like uh, people either go to bed too early or they in order to get this type of picture you need to be patient. So this place was like this is the Blue Gate. It's like 4 blocks from the hotel, and I went there with another participant that was with me on that tour, that was willing to come. When everybody, when the day was over for basically everybody, I offered all the people to go, but only one says, okay, I'm coming with you.
It was George.
And I saw George, yes.
Of course.
And I saw this place like earlier in the afternoon where we went there, and there is this cafe, like which is where from this picture is being taken. And I said, this will be a nice shot during the night, right? And we basically went back there. We, sat in the cafe, which was across the corner, put the tripod there, and just waited, right? So, I mean, if you go like during the day, this place is like packed busy, even at night. But we wait, and we took like several pictures until we found, during one time that nobody was walking there. So to me, like it makes the place to show like on a different setting that you normally see it.
Is that Fez or Marrakesh?
That's Fez.
Fez. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's another good point.
That's
And I don't know if the exposure information is showing on the screen, but this one is 13 seconds. So, you get rid of any like traffic or people walking as well, right?
Right. There is people walking there, but basically what I wanted is for no traffic. So basically, and I think if I look on my library, I did like, I don't know, 50, 60 images while we were there. But it was fun because we were having a nice conversation. We were drinking tea, sitting on the cafe with the tripods in front of us, and it was fun. So that's one of my many places that I like. And this one is also in Morocco. That's another picture, and that we met. Were you?
I had tea with him. Yes, I had tea with him.
Okay, but were you in this particular image?
No,
No, you were not.
You went inside because the year we went together to Morocco, I had my ankle in a brace, so I was not.
Oh, I thought you did come to the. Okay. So yeah, basically, this one is something similar. I mean, and I'm going to make a point showing other images of Myanmar. That basically, I told him, I saw the window. He was basically, the shoot was over because we go, to this man's house, and we take pictures of him in different places, different situations, and when we finish, we gather together and we drink tea that he prepares for us. And I saw him on this room where we was going to offer tea, and I saw the window, and I said, why didn't just he's basically pouring tea for us, for the group. And I told him, like, just do it by the window, right? And I told everybody, look, it's beautiful light here.
Shoot it.
But shoot it. But obviously, I think only a couple of people did, and I come up with this picture, which I really like because I think the light, it's nice on him, and it doesn't look like a very, posed image, or that he is doing something, specifically posed or staged for me. So that's the reason I like this image.
Yeah, it's very, for anybody who's been to Morocco, I mean, the tea, it's the mint tea, and it's very typical. And they do this thing where they pour it and they go like way up high. So for me, that's a really typical Moroccan. And he's wearing the, sort of the robe. It's very traditional. And even though you posed him there, he's doing something, like you said, he would normally do, right? You just put him in the better light. So
yeah,
I do that as well.
Well, because basically, I mean, we do, we stage images with him, but the shoot, when we were doing this, the shoot was over and we were not shooting anymore. So that's why I think, he gets relaxed as well.
Yeah, the light is awesome. Yeah, really is.
Yeah.
All right, Cav, you're up. I'm going to unmute.
Hey, right. So this is a photo from Bhutan. So, I mean, one of the things that is always important for any sort of travel photographer, especially if you're doing anything which is for, magazines, or even if it's for a photo book that you're creating, is you want to get your images to tell a story. And rather than just taking, portraits and things like that, which can look great, you want to try and vary it up as well, and try and create something that actually the viewer can see, and they can kind of read the story that's actually going on there. And this is a temple in the Bumthang sort of region of Bhutan. Photography in temples in Bhutan is banned because they're all owned by the government. But this is a privately owned temple, which allows sort of people who they know and who can make prior arrangements to go in and actually photograph these monks, when they're actually doing the evening prayer. And so I was actually the only person in this temple, the only foreigner in this temple. And I sort of had the whole place to myself, and I was able to go and photograph it. Now, this is a really difficult shot because, one, you've got low light. Two, these monks are actually moving. Whilst they're sort of praying, they're actually moving around. So, your typical being able to stick a camera or put it on a tripod and, go for a few seconds of exposure and not going to work. It's all going to be blurred. So what I had to do with this particular shot is I had to use a tripod. Also, because it's so dark, a great tip is when you're shooting anywhere which is very, very dark, trying to look through the viewfinder, you might find it difficult to see. So put it on live view mode. It'll make it much easier to be able to see what's going on rather than trying to look through the viewfinder. Obviously, I had to select a pretty high ISO to be able to get the image to be bright enough, so it's not going to be underexposed. So ISO is 2000. I've gone for a very, very shallow depth of field, 2.8. And then it was really a case of from those settings, I was then had to set my shutter speed. And there was a little bit of trial and error, and I had to sort of, take these photos on burst mode so that I could then pinpoint the one moment where they were all as still as possible. So this particular sequence, there might be about 8 or 9 shots in this particular sequence. And then I go through and I manage to select the ones where they are as still as possible. Because even with the shutter speed that I selected, as they're sort of moving around and they're swaying and they're moving their heads, and then because they're obviously reading, there is movement involved. So with something like this, you have to try and, one, give yourself enough time, and you have to also try and have a bit of trial and error. And what you want to try and do is try and get yourself the best opportunity to capture this photo. And in any shot like this, when you are going to have certain elements which are blurred, you need one thing which is going to be pin sharp. And if it's not pin sharp, then the image won't work because it's just going to look like it's a blurred image. So, as I said, this is a tough shot, and this is something that I really wanted to shoot, and I thought about it. I sort of planned for it beforehand by sort of trying to get my head around exactly the sort of settings that I might need. And then when I went in there, I took some test shots, and I sort of reviewed them, and then I sort of adjusted and as I went along. But I knew from the basics of it that it's going to be a high ISO and it's going to be a shallow depth of field.
So I'll just add to that. Like you've chosen an eighth of a second here, right? So like
Yeah.
that's the balance between, okay, if you go too slow, they're going to be blurry. Even the candle light is going to flicker. If you don't have a tripod, I've also found that if you shoot in burst mode and you shoot 3 or 4 frames and you're shooting handheld, the middle one will be sharper. And it has to do, especially for SLRs, because the mirror is flipping up and down. And the middle one, for whatever reason, because the mirror is up, is usually sharper. So there's kind of a little trick.
And actually, just to add to that as well, we're using that same technique. If you actually put your camera on live view mode and shoot in burst mode, it helps you out even more because the mirror then doesn't have to flip; it's already flipped. So that's a good tip as well. At some point, I'll send Darlene a photo I've taken in Red Square in Moscow of fireworks without a tripod at sort of ISO 6400, and that was done with live view. And because tripod wasn't allowed, that was the only way I could take that shot.
Good tip. Good tip. Okay, so I've chosen way too many images. The guys already gave me heck. So I've chosen sort of a few selection of different places that have been important to me in terms of my own travel experience and my own travel journey. And the first few were from Peru, because the first time I went to Peru was 2007. And I went with another lady who was a friend of mine. Her name is Diana. And she asked me to come and sort of be her assistant and photographer on this group that she was doing with several ladies. There was 8 lovely ladies, including myself. And that tour was eye-opening for me in that it made me want to build my own tours with photography, because the way that she had organized it and the things that we did on that tour were like, here, for example, we're in a small village. This is the same village we went down on the last one. It's Wiyok, up in the mountains around Ollantaytambo in the Sacred Valley. And we went to this village and we took food and we made hot chocolate and served the lunch to the kids. But we also took these shoes. They wear these shoes made from tires, and we took a bunch of shoes because we'd raised money and so on. So those are the kinds of things that I then wanted to build into our tours, and the things that I wanted to experience and have other people experience. So the Peru trip that I did in that year was really pivotal for me, and just interacting with the kids and the people there. It also made me want to learn Spanish. So this is why I'm learning Spanish and speaking Spanish. So there's one of the other little kids. She's drinking the hot chocolate, right? So they've got sort of the traditional outfits. This was eye-opening as well. You know, when you travel to other countries and you can get outside of the sort of tourist places and the things like galleries and museums, and those are great. I do galleries and museums, and I love seeing art as well. But I love to go to these villages and see how the people live. Like this is literally how they live. And we learned that when you look at their house, you can see this one is just stones, and then that it indicates sort of their income level, right? This would be like the poorest level because they have nothing on the outside. It's just the stones. If they've got like a plaster or a stucco, that's kind of okay, they can afford to the next level. If it's painted, now it's the next level. So you can kind of get an idea in these villages of who has some money and who doesn't based on the structure of their house. We watched them, you know, washing the laundry in the river with the old style thing where they scrub it on the washboard. Still, you know, so it's interesting because I've been thinking a lot about in this time of, you know, the pandemic and what would happen in some places. You know, our life, it may be different. Like thinking about what happens if the internet goes out or electricity or these kinds of things, because right now we're all relying on Zoom calls and stuff to stay in touch with people. And what struck me was these people that live in these villages, their life would not be any different. You know, like they have what they need to survive. So maybe they're better off than we are. And this lady sort of struck me as well because she was the oldest lady in the Sacred Valley at the time. She's, you know, passed away, but she was 84. And people always ask, what's the leaf on her face? It's a coca leaf, which makes cocaine, but it's a pain reliever. And if you go to Peru, they give you coca leaves to chew, or they would get coca tea to help you with the altitude sickness. but it's also like a pain reliever. So if you chew it, Dan, did you chew any of the leaves?
Yes, we had it on teas, and yes, we did it.
Yeah. So when you chew it, like your lips and your tongue is like you went to the
it gets it's good for the altitude basically.
Yeah.
It's
So that's what she has on her face, is the leaf to relieve some pain. She's had a problem with her eyes, right? And of course, Machu Picchu. So those are my Peru set, which was pivotal for me in terms of, it was a huge trip. First kind of time I'd been doing this kind of travel, a bit more intrepid, outside the normal, get off the tourist track. And I highly encourage people to do that kind of travel. At least once in their life. We've had people come with us. one fellow, maybe he's watching, John, came with us to Nicaragua, and him and his wife had a great time. And when I asked him at the end, how was your trip, and he said it was fantastic, we loved it, but it's not for us, we're not doing it again. So that's totally honest, and he's had a great time. And I love John. He always uses his pictures and wins lots of contests. So I encourage you to try all different kinds of travel. Any questions on those ones, guys? Okay, Let's look at Ugo's next one. Where are we now?
We are in Greece, one of my other favorite places in the world, and pretty close to where I live. So I go there almost every year. I've been there half a dozen times, maybe. This in particular is on an island that is called Amorgos. Went there last year, did a tour of a couple islands, Mykonos and Amorgos. Amorgos is a beautiful island. It's not very touristy. There's a lot of there to discover, beautiful landscape, beautiful sea. And this was actually a vacation. It was not a photography trip. So I was there with family and friends. So I didn't bring a lot of equipment. Maybe the story behind this image is the fact that I were traveling very lightweight, just carry-on luggage, and I only brought with me one camera. That is my Fujifilm X100S. Compact camera, no fixed lens, no interchangeable lens, one focal length. So I tried to just spend one whole week on a Greek island shooting with one camera, one lens. That was my objective there. And this is probably my favorite image that I got that week. There was sunset colors. I went to the top of this hill overlooking the sea, and I knew there were those abandoned mills. This is a very windy place. Like many Greek islands are very windy. So wind power was the main source of energy for the islands, and people had those mills to grind flour, grains, and make flour, and pump water if it was along the coast, and so on. So there's a lot of windmills. Some of them have been restored, some of them have not. This is an area that's
Oops. Sorry.
Okay, you still there?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is an area with a group of windmills, and I went there when the light was just perfect for setting sun.
Well, you say the camera is the Fuji X100S?
Yes, I've got that camera for almost 7 years now. And
You still using it?
Yeah, I'm still using it from time to time.
Yeah, it's a beautiful camera.
And I have the X100F, and you have which one, Dan?
I used to have it. I don't have it anymore.
Oh, you need to
I traded it. Yeah, I traded it in because when we went to Cuba, I want to have basically two bodies of the same. So I traded it for another XT3, so I could go and shoot with basically two bodies in Cuba. That's why I don't have it anymore. And I have the 35 millimeter lens. The 23 basically is the same lens that I can use on one of the XT3 cameras. So, but I love that camera. It's an amazing camera just to go and shoot and those things when you want to go live. And you, Arlene, you use it a lot. So
I use it a lot. I use it for street shooting. Like I've been to New York a couple of times, and that's all I've taken. and I love it for street. Like in Delhi, I used it in Havana. Yeah, same. Cav, you need to get on the Fuji bandwagon here. You're outnumbered.
Never gonna happen. Never gonna
But you could
happen.
get one of the little ones with the fixed lens, and just it's like a second. It's a great shooting street camera.
I'll stick to my Canons.
Get the Fuji X100. The V is the last
The
one.
new one, yeah, the V, yeah.
It's just like kind of like a gateway drug into the Fuji world.
No, never gonna happen. I'm not gonna be converted. If I get anything, it'll be the Canon mirrorless. But I'm happy with my Mark IV.
But anyway, I think that the story here is that sometimes you don't need a lot of equipment to
exactly
get great.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's the one. That's the point that I was trying to make. And yeah, I mean, the camera is not really. I mean, you can get great pictures with phones if you know what you are doing.
Well, a lot of people, you know, when I tell them that I do that and it's a fixed lens, or I go with just like my 50 or something, and they're like, well, what are you going to miss something if you don't have a long lens or a wide lens or this or that? Well, you might, but you might actually see something differently that if you just focus on one lens, you know, like just going out and shooting with your 50 mil or whatever. So
You need to pick your battles.
yeah.
Camera gear.
Yeah. All right, you're up, Kev.
Right. So this is one of my favorite places in the world, and it's just happens to be not too far away from me. So this is down in the part of England called Cornwall, which I may be biased, but it is, I think, one of the most beautiful areas in the whole world. You have this is the sort of, if you imagine the United Kingdom, the island, this is the tip that comes all the way down in a sort of a leg shape down towards sort of head looking towards North America and Central America. And this is a place called Carnivals, and these rocks are called the Badruthan Steps. And I have photographed this place, I'd say, you know, I wouldn't say thousands of times, but many, many times. And this is probably the best photo that I've got of it. And, you know, if you want to know the secret tip for capturing great landscape photos, it's light. Light is the most important element when it comes to landscape photography. And without beautiful light, this photo would not look the same. That's the key. So let's sort of pick it apart a little bit and talk about sort of, you know, the rationale behind this. So first of all, you know, as you can see, we've got the sun is roughly sort of towards around 10 o'clock, you know, in sort of the left direction. And it's not, there's no coincidence that I sort of captured this photo with the sun there. You know, it's about actually planning this. And I knew that, you know, to capture this shot, I needed to come to this place at a certain time of the year so that the sun will be roughly in that spot. And this is Cornwall again, United Kingdom. We get a lot of rain. So there's a lot of times that I've come here and this has been a complete washout with white clouds, no light whatsoever. And actually, funnily enough, on this particular day, I actually arrived here about midday just to scout it out. Beautiful sunny day. Headed back here around about 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. And then there was a sort of a bit of cloud cover. And I was down there. This is a famous spot in England. There was a lot of photographers there as well. And pretty much everyone packed up and went home. And I was just thought, no, I'm just going to hang around. And lo and behold, the clouds sort of dispersed and I've got this beautiful shot. So I've gone for a slow exposure, obviously, because I wanted to get the sort of the movement of the waves as they're coming out. Often I get, one of the questions I get asked is, you know, I don't like capturing this sort of smooth effect of water, so because it's not realistic. One of the reasons why landscape photographers do prefer to capture water in this way is that it just makes the scene a bit cleaner and it takes away the sort of distractions and makes other parts of the image really stand out. So I've gone with a slower image. Obviously we want to have a fairly you know, deep depth of field with f8. That gives me a fairly good level of sharpness across my image. And obviously I was using a tripod here, so I could go as low as I wanted to on the ISO. So it's ISO 100.
Right.
And this woman that was actually there, I had nothing to do with that. I don't know her. She just came here, you know, and started walking around on the beach and just standing around and just enjoying the view. And again, I just sort of took some photos, and I've got multiples of shots of her walking across the beach and, you know, walking in different sort of scenarios. And I just like this one because it just felt a bit more natural. You've got the sort of the stones that lead the eyes into this woman, and then the way that the woman is looking, it sort of then leads your eyes into the distance as well. So it's sort of, the journey across the image works in a bit of a path. And yeah, this is one of my favorite places in the whole of England.
That's a good point as well about adding people into landscape photos, because she adds a perspective and a sense of scale as well. Like you can tell how big those rocks are and so on. Because otherwise, I would think that rock in the foreground could be small, right? Yeah,
exactly.
I'm just going to slip over to this other one that you did of water as well to show the different approach. The other one was 1 second. This is a 20th of a second.
Yeah. So obviously, depending on the speed of the waves, you vary your and also the sort of the effect that you want to get. So if I went for a sort of 1 second on this particular shot, you won't see anything. It would just sort of all be blurred out, and the waves wouldn't actually show. But another good tip with a photo, something that I was told a long time ago by a very famous travel photographer, was, be prepared to take risks. Obviously, don't risk your life; it's not worth it. But sometimes you've got to be prepared to get wet, and this is exactly what I did with this shot. This was my first morning in Havana, and I headed over to the Malecon, and there were these sort of big crashing waves that were coming all over the sort of the banks and onto the thing. And I've always wanted to capture the shot of the Malecon. For me, that's a really iconic image of Cuba with a wave sort of crashing over the Malecon. So I sort of, stood and just watched where the waves were going first, trying to get a sense of actually, because there's certain spots that they tend to come over more than others. Again, this particular shot, my camera was on a tripod. I had all my settings correct. I went and stood there. I had one eye on the waves just to make sure that if something was going to kind of crash over, then I could at least turn myself and protect the camera. And again, I've got a whole set of these shots, and it was taken on burst mode. And again, it was about choosing the right moment. And the reason I like this is because the waves don't cross over onto the sort of the lighthouse El Morro in the background. If they did, that photo wouldn't quite work. You've got a sort of this bank that leads as a sort of a leading line that leads the eyes into the sort of the background. And I also even like the clouds, the way that the sort of the clouds almost present a part of the image that would have been
kind of
rather dull.
It's like a mirror of the water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
there's lots of things that came together here in this image. First of all, you were there at the right time. You had the right camera exposure and the right lens. You stood in the right place, and then had the right experience. So I want to just kind of reinforce that. Okay, you got lucky, but you made a lot of choices to put you in that position.
Yeah, and risk getting wet.
Which I might say that if you had a Fuji with a waterproof lens, you could totally take a full on. I've taken a full ocean wave on my Fuji, no problems, full on.
Well, it really depends how wet you get, I mean.
Yeah. The Canons are weather sealed, so they would have been fine. In fact, a couple of weeks after this, I was in the UK, and I went and photographed on a sort of a cliff, and I was about 40, 50 foot up on this cliff, and there was this was during the sort of the recent storms, and there was a wave that crashed onto the bank, and it sort of swelled up in the sky, and the wind took it, and I got absolutely soaked. My camera got absolutely soaked. But yeah, the Canon, the sort of the higher end Canons are weather sealed, so they will protect the camera with things like that. But obviously, if you drop it in water, then it's sort of goodbye.
Fuji's have been submerged. Just saying. All right, back to Dan. We're doing a Fuji commercial here. Back to Dan.
Yeah. Okay, so this one is from Cusco. It was taken also during the photo tour we did last year, and I went up to one of the tower bells in, what was the name of that plaza, Arlene? San Andres, I believe it is, where we be, or something like that. Okay, so we went to a higher point on the city. There is like a plaza And then there is a tower bell there that you can access and basically shoot the main, plaza of Cusco from there. And we went there for the evening to take the sunset, and then we stayed later on until the lights of the city came up. And basically, I waited until the light was right for take this picture there. So that's for me, this is one of the perfect time or one of my favorite times of the day to shoot. Basically, it's blue hour where you can have. It's not night yet. It's not 100% dark, and you have like a mixed lights from the city, and the images are like very nice to me in terms of how it renders colors and stuff like that. So,
Dan is a blue hour master. He's like his favorite thing: sunrise and blue hour.
Yeah. Well, I guess Cap said that before. You say that before. Light. Well, Ugo also mentioned like light is everything, right? So you need to be there. Sometimes you need to make sacrifices, right? You need to be there early. You need to be there late in order to get some quality of the light. And most of the images that the one that Ugo showed, with the mist, the one that Cap showed in the morning. It's a commitment, but at the end, the results are good, because in order, like especially in the morning, in order to get there, you need to be earlier than that, and you need to set up, with enough time in order for you to be there, right? And particularly, the other difference is at night. Particularly, people leave too early, like when they go there to take
tell them about Morocco.
Sunset.
The first tour that Dan did with me, he was co-leading with me because I had just come off of breaking my ankle and I wasn't able to do lots of walking, and he took the group up to the top of this hill in Chefchaouen to go and shoot the sunset. And tell them what happened.
Well, if I recall well, the sun goes down and everybody started to pack, and I said, "Where you guys are going? We haven't started yet. The best is coming." So they are looking at me. What do you think? Sunset is done. No, you need to stay there like at least like another half an hour, depending the time of the year or where you are. You need to stay there, so you can get this type of colors in the image.
So I'm just going to slip over to this other one because you have another example of blue hour, which is a really good one, right? There's a blue hour.
Yes. Yeah, this is exactly the same, basically the same time of the day. This was in Vietnam. And I was also, when we were doing the tour last year, I arrived there a couple of days before, and I was in the, going around the city, looking different places, which I haven't been before, and I wanted to see this place. So, I got there and I waited. There is no, they don't allow tripods there. So basically I sat from across the street and I placed my camera on top of my backpack to make this image. So it's not a very slow shutter speed, I believe.
Yeah, 40th of a second, f5.6, ISO 6.
What's the right, and the ISO is 6400. The reason I choose those is because you cannot use a tripod there. So I was trying to do the best that I can with the, resting the camera.
I just want to show this because there's a little bit of noise, but in terms of people are afraid of high ISO, don't be afraid of it, because sometimes you need to have that in order to get the shot, right? If you didn't use a high ISO, it's going to be too slow shutter speed. It's going to be blurry.
Right.
There was a thing I wanted to add about this concept of patience, the fact that you need to be patient, you need to wait for the right light, but sometimes you also need to be able to anticipate what the light will be in a given location and wait for the right moment. Be able to recognize when the right moment. There is a story that was told by, I don't know if you know Galen Rowell. He was a photographer, passed away years ago. He was a great nature photographer, and he has this story about when one day he was out with a group in Lhasa in Tibet photographing the Potala, which is the palace. It used to be the palace of the Dalai Lama, right? And where just everybody was happy with what they got and wanted to go back to the hotel to have dinner or so. He saw a storm coming, and he thought that would make for a great photo if the light of the sun with the storm in the back. So he stayed there, and he got a photo of a rainbow just hitting the rainbow was hitting the top of the palace from the distance, and it's a great photo. Fantastic light, and this symbol of peace atop that palace was just perfect. And he did it because he anticipated with his mind's eye. He previewed what might possibly happen if he stayed in that place, and he got that photo. Sometimes you also need that.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think too, it works the other way, is that if the weather is bad, don't pack up and leave, because 10, 15, 20 minutes later, it could be completely different, like the fog in Scotland. And I don't know if people can see this. So there's an app that's really great. And I know Daniel used this one as well, called Photo Pills. I'll put a link to that, and I'll see if I can find that Galen Rowell photo and share that with people as well, because that's a great story. But Photo Pills will help you know when is sunset, sunrise, even moonrise, the Milky Way, when it's going to be visible, all those kinds of things. And you can even plug in a location of where you're going to be. Right? It's a great app. It's a brilliant app.
Dar, can you go to pictures down? Like there is a picture of Patagonia.
This one?
That one. Yeah. So that's the best example. Well, to me, I mean, we have this example here. It's not the best, but it's one example of what you, Ugo, say. This was in Patagonia, and it was raining that morning. We went there like very early to shoot behind the clouds that you see there. There is supposed to be like a mountain range there. It's covered in clouds. So it was raining that morning, and we decided to just go and see, what happened, because the weather changed very quick there. So we arrived to the location. It was still raining, and we decided just to wait inside the car. And then, all the sudden, rain started to dissipate. The clouds still there, but we got this rainbow there. And because we were there at that time, I was able to make this picture, which is basically yes, I think there are 3 or 4 different images here. It's a composite of a panel.
Oh,
So I just wanted to take it's a vertical. I mean, I shoot the camera vertical, and I put them together.
cool.
So this is a good example of what Ugo said, that just wait for the time, just go, even if it's bad weather, because things can change.
Yeah, it's hard to get a full rainbow like that. That's good. Okay.
And if you look, there is like a second one there, which is not totally full, but there are like a second rainbow. Yeah.
What was the
here?
The focal length on that lens? Was that a single shot, or was a stitched panel?
No, it's a stitch panel. It's a 23 millimeter lens, but it's a stitch panel. And I normally do the panels I put the camera on vertical position to do all the panels.
Yeah, I just wanted to point it out, because some people might wonder, I want to take all of the whole rainbow in my photo.
Right.
No,
you cannot do that unless you have a very, very ultra wide angle. It will not fit.
And that's on your GFX camera as well, right? Yes.
Yeah, that's the GFX. The equivalent to full frame is 18 millimeters for that lens. Still, it's a panel, because as Ugo says, you cannot get all in one.
Okay, now I'm gonna do India, because I know Cav's got some India as well, and this was a bucket list item for me and had been for quite some time. Not so much the Taj. I put the Taj up because this is kind of the iconic shot everybody wants to get. And one thing that I want to talk about is doing something different. Like we talk about blue hour, long exposures, things like that. Here this guy basically grabbed the hold of us, and he saw we had cameras, and he's like, come with me, here, take a photo here, take a photo here. And we paid him, I don't know how many rupees, and he showed us sort of all the best places to shoot, like through these archways to frame the Taj. And that guy was really great. He obviously does that all the time. but I wanted to do something different as well. And this is kind of the reflecting pool that everybody gets the shot of. And I wanted to do some reflection, but I chose to actually crop out the actual Taj and just use the reflection. So I like to try and do angles that are different. So it might be a high angle, a low angle, or something like this where I'm using a reflection just to try and get something that's different, that especially when it's something iconic that you see a million of this thing, trying to do something a little bit different. So the thing for me that was the bucket list item was Pushkar. So Pushkar is a place in India. It's in the middle of the desert, and they have this camel fair every year where thousands of these camel herders, or hundreds of these camel herders, come together to trade and sell their camels and horses and all these kinds of things. Well, so that was on my list to go and experience and photograph that. So we took our group there. This was a year and a half ago, and we actually found that there was more photographers than there was camel herders. So we went super early in the morning. This was probably around 5 a.m. Like the sun is literally just coming up. We got there and it was dark. So we got up super early. We were there before the sun actually came over the horizon. And you can kind of see on the left here, let me get rid of this. You can kind of see on the left, the sun is just coming up there. These guys are actually having their coffee. So they're drinking their coffee out of a bowl and having their breakfast before they start doing their transactions and stuff. So it was really interesting for us to be there and see them having negotiations. We saw a few times where, these guys in suits would come and then buy a whole bunch of camels, and you could see the negotiations going on. So it was really interesting just to experience that and photograph that. And these guys have been photographed so many times that you actually have to pay them now to photograph them, which is a little bit sad, but you pay them a few rupees and they'll pose for you, and you take their picture. And I wanted to use this one as an example because, talking about light, this guy was actually facing the other direction, and the light on his face was not very good. So the sun had now come up, and you can kind of see it coming on the side of his face. And I wanted to get this cross lighting to highlight sort of the texture and his, he's got all these wrinkles and character in his face and the beard and everything. And I wanted the side light to highlight that. But I don't speak his language, right? Whether it's Hindi or something else that he speaks, but I can use sign language, right? So, and the easiest thing for me to do to get him to turn was I actually walked around and he rotated, because he wanted that money. He wanted me to pay him. So in order for me to pay him, he wanted to make sure, I got my photo. So he literally just turned as I walked around him, and I got into position so that the light was coming from where I wanted. Then I took this shot, right? And I've got a few different ones which were a bit wider. Like Dan said, I shoot a lot. And that's something else that pros tend to do is, like, I probably shot 20 or 30 pictures of this guy alone, different angles, some wide, some tighter. I got camels in the background of some just plain. And then this was my favorite one. And he's, I can see his eyes. He's engaging with the camera. So don't be afraid to shoot lots of pictures and pick your favorite later, because if you only take 2 or 3, like, for example, this might have been my 20th picture, and if I'd have stopped at 3, I wouldn't have this image, right? So don't be afraid to take too many, or especially in this fellow's case, he knows that I'm going to pay him, right? So he's perfectly willing to sit and wait while I take as many shots as I want, right? So that's how I kind of manipulated the light on this one, and it's a bit harsher from the side. But that was a bucket list item that I wanted to share. And I had to share this one just because Dan has FOMO on this one. So we hired some models while we're talking about light. We hired these girls to pose for us in the marigold field. And Cav was there, as Dan was there. We broke up into smaller groups. So everybody was working in smaller groups on our tour group. And this was my model, and I had put the sun backlighting her, and I had a reflector on her face. Now I've actually processed this one in Luminar and brought out sort of the haziness, and I've got another version where I actually added sun rays as well. But I love the light coming through her veil here, and I'll use backlighting a lot with a reflector or a flash if that's a possibility. Because we had set this up and we had people helping, so the other people in our group, somebody was holding the reflector while somebody else was shooting. So if you're traveling with a friend, don't be afraid to bring a flash, or I would just use a small reflector. It's about 22 inches, folds down nice and small. Or something else that we used in Italy was the new LumiCube with a little LED light, and I think I have an example of that as well. So you don't have to carry a lot of stuff. Dan tends to bring lots of stuff and big soft boxes and lights and things. I travel a lot lighter, like Ugo was talking about earlier. So that's my India. But I want to go back to this one, and then we're going to skip to calves, because the funny thing is that he's got the same guys, or the same guy, just have to find them now, in his shot. So the guy in the yellow turban is the same guy. Go ahead, Kev, it's your turn.
Yeah, so I mean, as Darlene said, this is a place that has been photographed, I mean, so many times, and every single one of these guys has probably had his portrait taken 20 million times. I mean, I'm surprised they're still selling camels, because they're probably all millionaires by now. But you know, the one thing with situations like this that I always recommend, whenever you're photographing something like this, something like the Venice Carnival, you know, things like the Day of the Dead, you know, Kumela, all of these sort of holy, everything that you see, try and take some inspiration from that and see if you can actually do something a little bit different. And sometimes that does mean taking risks, sometimes photographically, I mean, and sometimes it means that you have to get yourself dirty and you know, actually lie on the floor. And this is what I did for this shot. And, you know, the one thing that from this particular shoot, I have got hundreds and hundreds of photos of portraits of, you know, pretty much everything, including the camels. But what I really wanted to get a sense of is actually the amount of layers that you see within this sort of scenario. And one of the things that was quite obvious to me when I was looking at the scene when I was there was that, you know, you could see camels and people and, you know, a whole load of different things happening all across this great sort of field that all of these guys were at. And I wanted to sort of get that across, the sort of the idea that actually you can keep looking at a scenario and see more and more things happening in the background. So what I did was as I said, I sort of got on the ground and laid down on the ground, and what I used, there was a guy that's obviously on the left-hand side of the photo, and I love the expression on his face that he's smiling, and there's also a guy on the right-hand side that you can't see off, which has been cropped out, and they kind of almost act as the sort of the pillars that draw your eye into the middle of the image. So the guy that's on the left-hand side is blurred out because that's not where I wanted the focus to be. The focus is on the two guys that are sat, you know, around the fire. But then, you know, going further beyond that, you've obviously got the camels as well that are sitting in the background. And one of the key tips, again, when it comes to travel photography is crossovers. You know, try and avoid things crossing over from each other. And, you know, this particular photo, if the heads of those camels were crossing all over each other, this image would not work. You know, it works because there's separation between them. You know, you've got the sort of the 4 or 5 camels there, the one that's just poking out from behind, which I would have preferred him to just duck down a little so we didn't get himself in there, but so be it.
And really, just, you know, tuck his head in a little bit.
I know, that's what I did. I did my best camel impression, but he didn't listen.
You don't
and that's the thing. And, you know, another funny story as well. We were in Thailand on a photo tour, and, you know, I said to people, look, if you want to capture a photo, you know, of this particular woman weaving, you know, let's get from, not this particular one, but get on the floor. And actually one of our tour members, Cornelia, didn't want to get on the floor. So I actually took her camera, laid down on my back on the floor and took this photo for her with her camera. And then I was obviously covered in dust and everything else. But, you know, try and look beyond the obvious of just head and shoulder shots. You know, we get used to photographing everything at eye level. And sometimes just getting a little bit lower, a little bit higher can give you a completely different perspective and a completely different image. And this particular image, actually, just recently, a couple of weeks ago, got bought to be used in a big sort of exhibition, but it was more like a trade show. And it was blown up to sort of, I think it's about 20 feet. So, you know, it just pays that sometimes if you actually look beyond the obvious, you can actually capture a shot that looks completely different to what already exists out there.
Yeah. And I think another good example is, like, if you see something, I actually did a shot where I framed one of these guys underneath the camel's legs. That was kind of a shot that I was going for. So I looked for a scenario where I could, find one of these guys, and then I backed up and found a camel that I could shoot through the legs, and did various different scenarios. On Cornelia's defense, she did climb on top of guards to get a shot in India, where she was on that.
True, that is true.
So she's willing to go up high and not.
That's true.
Everybody's got their limits, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's see how much time we have. Let's go a little quicker, guys. Which one do you want to do next, Ugo? I think you're muted. Hang on. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just quickly, the middle one. It's nothing really. I mean, just I wanted to include this because this is probably what I think is the most beautiful city in the world to photograph, and that is Rome. This is one of my favorite spots where the light never ceases to amaze me. So I'm just going to. This photo is about the scenery and the light.
So was it that pink, or did you enhance that in processing?
It was pinkish, but yeah, I did enhance it a bit in processing. Yes, to be honest.
I was going to show this one because I've got Japan as well. So if you want to do this one, and then I'll lead into my Japan.
Okay, yes, this is in Japan. It was the place called Fujimi Inari Taisha. I think it's in Kyoto. It's a beautiful sanctuary where they have these paths that are covered with these orange
gates,
like gates, tori in Japanese, with those lanterns once in a while. And I shot that in the early evening. It was actually not that dark outside, but it's you don't see much of the outside because it's relatively much brighter inside. It's a great place. It has a lot of opportunities to shoot. It's hard to get a photo that you probably haven't seen 100 or even more times because there's kind of the perspective that makes most of those photos, right? Those perspective of those orange gates.
But you were talking about patience before, so this is
it's again about patience because it can be a crowded place. It was not super crowded when I was there, especially when it started getting dark. People started these paths go up a mountain, and people walk up the mountain and then they come down. And when they start coming down, it gets a little less crowded. You just have to wait a little bit that nobody will be in your photo. I've got a couple of photos from the same scene where this was a relatively long exposure because it was dark. I was on a tripod, maybe a few 10 or 20 seconds.
Yes.
Then you get somebody walks in, takes a selfie with the cell phone, which is lit up and ruins the photo, and you have to take it again. So you just need a little bit of patience.
So I went to the same place and I did the same thing. I went there at sunset, and it's interesting because I had a friend who, I think it was Brandon who was going there. I think it was him I recommended, or somebody that was going there. And I said, go in the morning for sunrise, because at sunset, it was still really busy even after. And he went in the morning and he had a much better success. But I'll tell you what happened to me when I'm there. So I'm going up the mountain, like you said, and it gets sort of less and less people the more you go, and the gates get smaller and things. And so I'm doing a shot like this. I got my tripod set up, and then I start hearing this like this growling, right? And I'm like, what the heck? And there's these other girls kind of coming up the path, and we're all standing there. We're like frozen. We're like, what is this growling, right? And we keep hearing it, and then it gets louder and it gets louder. And there's these breaks in the gates where there's like paths that cross and things, right? So all of a sudden we're standing there, and about 5 feet in front of us, 4 of these wild pigs run across the path. And we're all like freaking out, because they said, when you get down on the pamphlet or when you go in, they say, watch out for wildlife. There's these wild pigs, and I guess there can be monkeys up there as well. And my friend who's been to Japan, he's been to this place like dozens of times. He said he's never seen pigs there, right? So I had this experience, and it was dark, right? So it was kind of, we just avoided them. We let them go their way, and then we continue. So you did not see any pigs there?
No.
You're lucky. I didn't get a picture of them, but they were scary. They were quite big, like I would say a couple 100 pounds. So my Japan, I have a temple as well, and I think which one am I going to show you? I've got a few different temples. So Japan for me was a huge bucket list item as well, and um, this is a couple that was on the. I was doing a food tour with a friend who does a small group, and I was on this tour. So we were all about eating on this one, not photography. And then this was at the end of the tour. They decided they wanted to rent kimonos, and I wanted to go and photograph this, iconic temple, which is also in Kyoto in Gion. And they said they want to rent kimonos, and I said, let's do this shot. And it was funny because she showed me this picture on Instagram of this person in the kimono and the exact same spot at sunset. And I said, that's what I want to shoot. And they're like, okay, let's do it. So they dressed up and they rented the kimonos. This one is actually a composite image of exposed for them for one shot and then the sky for another shot, because there was too much contrast between them. So then I masked them in. So I did a very long exposure to get, whoa, where did I go? I did a long exposure to get, you could see the people sort of moving in the foreground. They stood very still. And then I did another one exposure for the sky and made sure that I got lots of detail and we got some nice clouds and things. And then we kept shooting. So there's Dan's, keep shooting into blue hour and so on. So I kept shooting into the blue hour. And then I had this idea of what if you light yourself with your cell phone, like Ugo was saying, doing this selfie. So we actually went and bought her a fan that matched her kimono. It's the pink. And she's holding her cell phone, lighting her face. And then I had her partner and our other friend go and sit in the background, and they lit themselves with their cell phone. And this one is 2 exposures again. So one for the people and then one for the sky. And I masked it together. And I made the sky sort of that same purpley pink in the processing to match her kimono. So waiting for the sky. And then I wanted to show this one because I just played around with it in Luminar, and I changed the sky to be like a night sky. And I actually added the sunburst on the light on the lantern. So there's kind of some really cool features in Luminar to that you can play with, like the sun rays adds this rays on the light post. So they're there already. I just enhanced them a little bit and made sort of like a matte look on the picture. So these were part of my bucket list thing. The main reason I wanted to go to Japan was these guys here. So the snow monkeys was something that like things that I have on my bucket list are not just, okay, I want to go to that place. I want to go to that place for a particular thing, right? So Pushkar Festival, I want to go there, right? Italy was Carnival, because I've been to Italy before, but I want to go to Carnival. Japan, for me, was the snow monkeys. So I wanted to see the monkeys that go in the hot springs. So you could see this guy sitting on the edge here. And I was there in March last year. So it was the snow was mostly melted, but you could see still some on the hill. And these guys are literally just running around everywhere. These are wild monkeys. You have to walk about a half an hour from where the parking lot is to get to the parks, because they want to keep the monkeys separate from sort of civilization. They don't want them getting into doing things like eating garbage and stuff like that. They feed them there. So they come and they go in the hot pools. You can see they're in the hot pool and he's picking out the fleas or whatever. And I like to do stuff like this in my photography as well, which is like, for me, an element of humor, right? Like, how many monkeys do you see in this picture? Do you see 4 monkeys or do you see 8 monkeys? Because for me, it's like, okay, they lined up exactly, the people behind the monkeys lined up exactly. And I took the shot and I just thought, how funny is that, right? But you can see there's lots of people, and these guys just kind of go around. They'll run all the way around you. I have a selfie with a monkey sitting like right behind me. But it's definitely a really interesting experience, and I love their faces. Like I'm shooting this with this is an 80 mil lens on my Fuji, but I'm probably like no more than 5 feet away from this guy. I'm doing like a headshot of these monkeys. This is full frame. I've not cropped this, right? So you get the opportunity to get pretty close to them. I don't know why that was not loading. But I love their little faces. They look so sweet. But look out if they are arguing about something, because they got in some fights. Like the males are very dominant, and of course it's spring, so they want to, get together with the females and make some babies, right? This lady, this one, she was just super sweet. I did the background white because I wanted to focus on her face. So I stayed there probably I went in the morning. I stayed in the village nearby and took the sort of shuttle bus in. And I stayed there. There's one of the babies. I stayed there probably 4 hours because I was going to leave, and then I kept seeing something else, and then more monkeys would come, and then they were feeding them, and I was like, I came all this way, and this is my bucket list item, so I'm going to stay here and enjoy as much of this as possible. So I highly recommend that if you have something on your list that you want to go do or you want to experience, make the most of it. Do all of it, take it all in. So I love these guys. That is my Japan experience, and I totally want to go back. Okay, actually, let's go to Dan. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. Which one you want to do, Dan?
You can go to the ones of Myanmar.
Okay.
The other ones first. Yeah, that one.
I like this one.
Yeah, well, that's the reason this picture is one example of why I take the hassle of travel with a lot of gear, meaning lights. So this obviously is a stage picture. You need, in order to make things like this, you need to like organize them and, hire these monks or, pay for stay inside the temple. But you can come up with results like this. And the way this was done is obviously, you could go certain time of the day where you can have the sunrise coming through the window, but that day was overcast. So the sunrise that you have there is actually a flash that I put outside, that window at basically full power. And that's the way I created that. And there is another flash inside, which is basically bouncing from, on one of the walls. That's why it has that warm tonality there. To put lights on the monks, and the whole scene itself is underexposed because I didn't want the candles to burn. That's why the candles doesn't look like they're like overexposed. It's basically because the whole thing is underexposed, and I am putting light on the subjects with the flashes.
Well, you tricked me because I thought this was shot with candlelight and the sun coming through there. So it's interesting because literally I had this discussion with somebody on my Facebook group yesterday or the day before about how flash doesn't look natural. I totally would be fooled.
Yeah, that's the reason I am explaining this, because this is a totally, and I had time to do this. I was there by myself. It was like on a scouting trip that I did a couple of years ago, and I had time to do it. I had, if you are rushed, you cannot do it. So you have time to set up for the lights. To get the right pose that you want and shoot. And one of the things that I normally do when I do things like that is, I don't have these guys there doing that like the whole 15-20 minutes that it's taking me to put the lights, because they will get bored, tired, and they will go. So I just put, like the fixer there, to help me, and or somebody else that is there until I get the exposure that I want. And then I call them in and say, okay, now let's put the candles, let's, put there, and we're going to take some pictures. And as you say, I have many different versions of the same shot. They have vertical, horizontals, they have from different angles. These are the ones that, that I like the most. So that's one of the things that you can do when you know what you are doing with with your flashes and setting up things like that.
Can you explain to people what is a fixer, and like how did you find the ones that you work with?
It takes a lot of time, to go to the places, and either depending where you are, sometimes you do research online and you find them and just communicate with them. But basically, a fixer is someone that can help you to make things like this happen. He's expert on the place, who knows access to location, to models, to people, and you can basically hire him and say, look, I want to, this make this sort of photography. I need access to these places, and he will help you to get there. In this case, I mean, I actually had to pay to the, I think it's the archaeological, this is in Bagan. We paid to the archaeological survey, I think it's called Archaeological Survey Directory or something like that, to basically have access to these temples. And they literally come and they, scouted, to these places with us, and they literally opened the temples for us. There was nobody there, which is us. And I did this in 2 different places there in Bagan. I paid for like the whole day. And basically the fixer told me these are the templates that we should go. He said that to me because I was not in there. I said, okay, let's go there. And so we went there, with the local authorities, where they basically opened for us, like both of them. So,
and I was just going to say that if people are not interested in, hiring a fixer, because it is not easy to do, join a photography tour or an organized workshop that will do that for you. We do that in India and on our tours that we do. And I was just going to come down here to
if you go quick to just show 1 minute to Myanmar, the other 2 images that I have there is basically coming to. I was coming to that point. I mean, you don't have to do things like that. What this is like on the Shwedagon Pagoda there. And one of the things that I often see a lot, if people don't get close enough to the action, we saw that in Cuba, we saw that in a lot of people is afraid. I was like, basically, if you sit there, like I was sitting there, like, obviously with respect to the people, and you stay there for a few minutes, they will forget that you are there. And you can do, your thing, you can shoot, and you can get images like this, or like the one captured before, which are like intimate, shots to me that can show a story, but you need to be willing to get close to them and, to the people to make things like this happen. Yep. So you don't necessarily need a fixer or things like that. There are different things that you can do as long as you are willing to just get close and have patience.
And I do a lot of people photography, like a lot of, like if you look through my images, a lot of my stuff is people involved, and because that's my background, and I do portraits. And a lot of times people that travel with us or workshops I'm doing, they're afraid of approaching people. So if you're on an organized tour or workshop, that's going to be arranged for you. Like the dancers in Cuba, we arranged the dancers in Cuba. The lady with the cigar, that was from a previous tour that we did. We arranged this guy in Varanasi in India. So we do a lot of that type of thing. And then the same I was just going to show in who's this guy? Oh, Dan. So get into the picture yourself sometimes. I think I have a picture of Cav lying on the ground with the camels as well. But I was going to mention this one because this is one from Venice that I did with Ugo recently. And I'll tell a little bit about this one, and then maybe Ugo wants to talk about it because that's something that he organized as well. So he organized this photo shoot for the group for his workshop, and I had this little LED light. I'll post a link to it. It's called the LumaCube, and it worked really well because we weren't allowed to use a flash or a tripod or anything in there. And I'm using a lens with a big aperture, so 1.4, like really wide aperture here. ISO 2000, but I'm using the light on her. The light is not coming from this lamp. It's actually Ugo's holding it on a little miniature tripod. He's holding it up, and I have some pictures of him holding it also.
I do have FOMO about Venice, so you know.
He has FOMO. Okay, I keep like making Dan have FOMO. So
yes.
So these are the kinds of things that Ugo set up for us in Venice with the models and private photo shoots. Right? I wanted to just mention
I'm the photographer and the fixer there.
Yes, he's done everything. We arranged this couple to do an evening shoot, and we did some of them, with the softbox and sort of what I call like a normal portrait. And then my idea was to do some things with the light painting. And what happened here was they were posed, and we were doing some stuff with different tools and things and going with the flashlight. And these two German ladies come along, and they had these outfits that are covered in lights. And Ugo, I think you invited them to go in the picture, and we have one where they're standing there and in the picture as well. And then this lady, she can't have been more than about 4'8" or something. Like I'm 5 foot nothing, and she was down here. And
I thought she was a child at this time.
Yeah, we thought she was a child. She was very small. And we thought it was a father and a son. And it turned out it was two ladies. And she says, what if I danced through the scene during the picture? Because she got into it and was watching what we were doing. So these streaks, these yellow streaks, is actually from her costume. And so the first one, she walked in front of them, and there was too much light. And then she looks at it on the camera. She says, it's too much. Okay, I need to do less. And she's like thinking through this process. And then she says, oh, I need to go behind them. So this was a real collaborative effort of, Ugo arranged the models. We picked the location. I brought the light painting tools. And then there was this serendipity thing that happened with these ladies that showed up and just walked through the scene and totally made the picture. So I know that Mango, the fellow with the balloon, he said it was a very interesting photo, and he was very, very happy with it because it's different, right? Like, how many times did these guys get photographed at the carnival, Ugo?
Many. They've been doing this for many years.
Many years. So for us to come up with something a little bit different for them is interesting as well. So they're not bored with the same thing.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the carnival in Venice is that many people ask me about it. And are those people paid?
Yes, I get the same question.
To do that, right? Actually, no. Those people go to the carnival and they spend a lot of time and a lot of money, sometimes more often making their own costumes. It takes months.
Yep.
And do a lot of research, finding the clothing and all the little things that they put on them. Some of them are incredibly elaborate. Yep. And they do it for fun, to go there, to meet friends, and to be photographed. They don't want anything more than be photographed and have their photos sent to them after.
They all have a little business card. I have them somewhere. Of all the people I photographed, they give you a business card with their name and their email and their picture in their costume. So, because later, how are you going to know who's who? So I think that's brilliant. And then you can just send them a copy of the photos. So if you're going to do that, make sure that, like Ugo says, like follow through and actually do it. And I wanted to show these last couple because this was sort of another, there was sort of these iconic shots, like Cav mentioned, iconic shots of different places. So for me, Venice, I wanted to obviously get the canals. Okay, so I did that. And I get a, sunset shot of the canal and the boat is moving, a longer exposure. Okay, I did that. I'm going to get the gondolas bobbing, a long exposure. Okay, I did that. So I've kind of gotten the iconic pictures. This is light trails from boats. So again, Blue Hour. We love the Blue Hour. And then things like the masks, right? Obviously, I wanted to photograph the masks. We did a gondola ride. But then I wanted to do something in the morning. I wanted to get this Blue Hour with a costume character with a mask. So now, again, we're getting up super early in the morning, like get up at 5 a.m., get there at 5:30, something like that. And I thought about it after. These people are already dressed in their costume. I mean, I just literally got up and threw my clothes on and out the door, had my stuff ready to go. But they have to fully get into their costumes and get there. And they go and they pose. They know where to stand. They know where to pose. And all I did with this one was I just had her, tip her head up. Well, I don't even know if it's a woman inside, to be honest, so that there was light coming on the face there. And then these ones here I did off-camera flash. So there was so many photographers. So we're in that same place where I photographed the gondolas right on the just outside San Marco Square. And they're all lined up along the water there. So there's probably maybe 12 photographers photographing each of these characters, each of these costume characters. And I wanted to get the flash off the camera because the difference is when it's on camera flash, it flattens out the subject. And here you could see that the flash is off to the side because there's a shadow here. So I didn't have anybody with me. I had a remote on my camera to fire the flash. And I put it on a 2-second timer. And what I did was my tripod's here. I literally pressed the button and ran 4 feet to the right with my flash. And there's all these photographers in between. And I'm like walking in front of them. And this is the last day. And I kind of, at that point, I was like, okay, I've kind of had it with all these other photographers. They've been pushy and rude and everything. It's like, okay, today I'm going to be the pushy and rude person just for one time because I want to get my shot. So I got the Grim Reaper shot here and a few others. So I managed to get like the iconic shots that I had in my head because I was willing to get up at 5 o'clock and I was willing to sort of go the extra mile. I got the tripod, and then it was freezing that morning, right? That's the morning we did the interview, Ugo, and we were sitting in the square and it was cold. So you have to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes, and Dan has written about that on the website. I'll put a link below the video for you guys if you want to read about that one. And we've talked about being uncomfortable, right? So the only other thing I was going to mention about that is I also had one of my older cameras, my XT1, converted to infrared, and I started playing around with some infrared while I was in Venice as well. So I'm looking forward to going out with that camera and doing like some landscape and things. I also brought a lens baby, which Ugo played with as well. So all kinds of things like light painting tools, lens baby, infrared, shooting at blue hour, long exposure, just to try and do something different of a subject that has been photographed so many times before. And I've sent this photo to this fellow, and he loves it. You know, he says, oh, it's so different, right? And it works really well with the vampire, right? So we're having the pandemic, and I said, well, maybe I'm going to go with the vampire apocalypse instead. So I think we should wrap up. I want to ask you guys, I got you to think about before we started. So let's say the world is going to come back to, quote, normal, whatever that looks like, when we land in society again. And let's say we're able to travel. Where's the first place you guys are going to go, other than, to go see your family and collect the hugs and things? Where's the first place you're going to go outside of your own borders? Any thoughts? Dan?
Well, I go first. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a clear choice because I was supposed to be going to China the first week of May. Obviously, it's not happening. So as soon as I have the opportunity, as soon as things start to reopen, I'm going to basically reschedule that trip. It's been a place that I wanted to go for many years, and I plan to be. This was planned like maybe 9 months ago, and unfortunately, it's not going to happen. So I'm still have my bookings in terms with the people over there, and I told them I'm going to postpone. So we'll see. I mean, hopefully, sometimes later on the year or early next year, it's going to happen.
Sounds good. Cav?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you need
For me, it's also China as well. I was actually supposed to be going there in June to do a shoot for a client, and it was going to be 3 weeks. It was going to be amazing, but obviously it happened. So I may wait, and obviously when I can rekindle that. But also, it kind of in terms of actual bucket list, I think the thing that I've had on my bucket list for a long time, and the next one is going to be in 2023, is Kumela in India. So I'm definitely going to be going to that. But yeah, next probably China.
Ugo?
2020 for me was when I was thinking of taking a sabbatical and going around the world for 6 months.
Oof.
So that was not going to happen anyway because of work commitment and other stuff. So probably rethink about it for 2021. The idea is to travel east, to go somewhere in the Middle East. My main destination would be Turkey, Uzbekistan, a couple of countries in Southeast Asia that I've not seen, like Myanmar and Vietnam. Probably go back to Malaysia, where I got some friends. Japan, I definitely want to go back to Japan, and from there fly down to Australia, where friends that have promised I'm going visit, and then end up in New Zealand and maybe stay there for the rest of my life.
Yeah, so I'm thinking as you guys are talking, because there's so many places that I want to go back to. Japan calls me back again. Dan and Kev and I have a standing date to go meet there in Japan when we can. China's on my list as well, but I'd love to go back to Colombia and see more of the country, because I just fell in love with Colombia and the people and the place. I'd like to live there, so not necessarily to travel like Ugo said. I'd like to stay there for 6 months and just be there. But I'd like to go back to Tuscany. I saw a little bit of it in Florence, and I would love to go see more of the countryside and just rent a villa and hang out for a week or two and drink some wine and photograph some beautiful landscapes and see the Cinque Terre as well. Ugo and I have a standing date for that one, so I will hold you to that. But I would love to go back and do Carnival. I'm hooked. It's amazing. It was like an amazing experience, and it was so much fun that I want to do it again. I met some great photographers there from France and Germany and other places, and Italy, of course. And the people dressed in the costumes. Like, I have all these new Facebook friends now. And I want to go back and meet them again. And maybe I will learn some more Italian by next time and go from there. So my Spanish is coming. Next is Italian, French, Portuguese, who knows? So
it's not that different than Spanish. I mean,
no, it wasn't that different.
It's close enough.
Yeah, I could actually understand quite a bit of Italian when I was there, when Ugo was speaking with people. So I think it's hard to know where I'm going to go first. May depend on if I'm running a tour or something, but I'm always drawn back to Asia. I'm drawn back to South America, and I'm drawn back to Italy and France. So too many places, too little time, right? So thanks, guys, for doing this. I hope people enjoyed our images and learned a little bit of maybe the places that we visited, something about photography, some tips today, and give you some inspirations of where you might want to go on your next journey when the world opens up and we can travel once again. So I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, where are you going? Take care and stay safe.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for having us.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Okay.
So just in